Hello, I'm Keith Reynolds. Welcome to SMarketPlace, where we're all about sales, marketing, and rock and roll. I'm here with Tom Dempsey, and uh, Tom, welcome.
Thank you, Tom Dempsey, market share growth experts. Happy to be here and happy to have our guest on the program.
Tom, you just came back from Vegas seeing Dead and Company in residency, so we're going to check in with you.
Yes.
Awesome. And Sarah, welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
Nice to be back. Doing well. Happy to be back on the show after a week of travel last week.
Well, it's been fun. We've done we're almost to 20 episodes, and you make this all happen in the background, and so now we're pulling you forward. So welcome, and our special guest, Burt Levy. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So we are doing this to help the people that we're meeting out on the networking tour. And Burt, I've met you. We had several connections, but we met on an H7 conference call, and we've had several cool conversations since. And I'm really excited to share your story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell us
So
a
I'm
little bit
Burt
about
Levy.
yourself.
I am Burt Levy. I'm, as I like to say, I'm a recovering media professional. I spent 22 years at the Chicago Sun-Times. I served as director of the entertainment division, and I also had some other leadership roles. Um, Director of major accounts, big box retail, local retail, and I culminated my career at the Sun-Times as publisher of one of their regional magazines called North Shore Magazine. Was a high demographic, went to a high demographic audience, high net worth, very similar to like a Hamptons or a Beverly Hills. And I got into tech. We sold the magazine, and I got into technology a little over 10 years ago. Um, and I was probably 10 years behind most of my contemporaries who bailed much earlier than I. But I hung in there a lot because I really, and I still do believe in the media model of newspapers, but I think they have to change the way they run their business. You can't run a newspaper today the same way you ran it 20 years ago.
Hmm.
I think you have to be, they always say think outside of the box. I think you have to just blow up the box. But in any event, I am currently the president and CEO of Revenue Mountain LLC, and we function as a fractional chief sales officer specializing in technology products and helping technology products go to market. This business was created. I basically did this. I took a 18-month-old technology company, specialized in consulting on in the Microsoft platform on data automation and integration. And I took them to market to the tune of about 900,000 plus in revenue within a 24 to 28 month period. And the byproduct of that success was having other tech companies reach out to me asking, can you do this for us? And most people start a business and they have to go find clients. I had the clients dropped in my lap and wrapped a business around it. And so what I was able to do was do what I was doing when I took the technology product company to market, which is having a data automation hub. But I have three succinct divisions or silos. I have a sales silo where we will bring a product to market either as a conduit to your sales team or a, a sole agent. We'll fill fractional roles inside a company. So if a company's looking to hire a vice president of sales, that might take 4 to 6 months, and they need that seat kept warm, and they need their sales team to be worked with and coached and mentored and led, we will fill that role as well. Um, this is something, sales is something that I've always done well in the media space, but more importantly, I think I did well when I got into leadership, and I want to make sure everybody understands there is zero correlation between being an accomplished revenue generator and being an accomplished leader. Uh, in the corporate world, they think that if you do a good job in sales, you must be a good leader, and that's always the natural progression. But there is no correlation. But I got very lucky because I had people that came before me that showed me by example on how to lead. And so the sales function, the data automation and integration, and the third silo is we have an IT procurement division where we help match technology companies with the businesses they serve based on need from the outside world. It's a lot to source a tech company, and we have it set up so we've done 75 to 80% of the homework before a client sits at the table. So it's three separate silos, but they all tie together. And it's really I'm big on there's a lot of bad salespeople and there's even worse leaders out there. And so I'm big on helping companies with their building culture and leadership.
Well, that's a good segue. Thanks for that introduction. And it's really interesting how you've integrated your experience from media into tech sales. I mean, there's been a huge integration of those industries over the years. And as you said, some people bailed. I'm really interested in what is it that got you interested in media sales, and then what have you brought with you from those mentors and the leadership that you learned in that industry over to tech? What's some of the lessons you've learned?
What kind of inspired me in the media was um, a high school teacher I had. She taught a media class. Her name was Ellen May Long. And what I find interesting about teachers is, when you have that one teacher that just inspired you, maybe and believed in you more than you believed in yourself, to do great things, that's something that stays with you for a lifetime. I could probably ask each one of you if you've had a teacher or professor that has, really inspired you or left you with some type of impression. And I'm sure you'd all have an answer. And then if I asked you what were the rest of the teachers you had that day, none of you would remember. And that goes really to show the power of a teacher that can help influence you. So she got me turned on to the media business. As young as second grade, we used to get the Chicago Sun-Times at school, and we'd read it as a classroom. And also, I lived in a home where if there were, I grew up in Chicago, so at one point we had 5 newspapers.
Right.
We had the
Right.
Sun-Times, the Tribune, the Chicago American, Daily News, and the Chicago Today. And my dad brought them all home. So I grew up in a family where there was always newspapers around. And it just kind of worked out for me coming out of college that, I had met some, interviewed at the Sun-Times and was hired there. And I never looked back. I mean, what was interesting about the business side of the business, you can come and work in a major market on the business side. But if you want to be on the talent side, like on air and broadcasting or a writer, they usually send you to some small market for a few years, and then you get to come back when you graduate and go to the big city. I was able to do that right away,
Mm.
and it was an enormous amount of fun.
All the way through that journey, you became publisher of a.
Not publisher of the Sun Times. That was actually one of my goals, but I think the business became a little too dysfunctional. But I became a publisher for one of our regional magazines, and that was great fun. I mean, having I remember when they offered me the job, and they're like, how'd you like to be publisher of North Shore Magazine? And I was like, eh, eh. I mean, at the time, I was overseeing the entertainment division. My biggest portfolio of business was the Hollywood movie studios. That portfolio in itself was a good $20-30 million worth of revenue. And I had Roger Ebert as a film critic. I didn't really want to leave that, but I also I couldn't pass up the opportunity to have complete autonomy over advertising, editorial, marketing, promotions, finance, production, distribution. It was a too valuable experience to turn down, and that's kind of how that all came together.
Well, you talk about leadership. That's the essence of leadership, is getting the control and the P&L responsibility for a media property like that. That's like the pinnacle of a career.
Yeah, I think that being a good leader is really it's understanding that leadership's a responsibility, not a rank. And to really be a good leader, you don't have to be better at the people's jobs that you're leading than they are. What you have to do is make sure that you can provide the resources, both physical and emotional resources, for them to grow. And that's what we always tried to do. And I learned early on about being an empathetic leader. I learned early on about being the last one to speak. Um, I learned early on about trying to be a good listener, but really bringing empathy to leadership is really the key. And most leaders are not like that. There's a lot of leaders that still they try to lead by fear. They instill fear, and that's, to me, that's the coward's way to lead. And it's I've heard that your immediate, what do you call it? Immediate. I don't like the word supervisor and boss and manager, but I like leader, mentor, coach. But your direct supervisor at any job you're in is more important to you than your primary care physician, because they truly decide how much stress you go home with at night. And I think that being a leader, all business leaders can help change the world. And the way you do it is by how you send your people home at night. My goal was always to have my people go home every day feeling respected, admired, appreciated, and valued for their contributions at the office that day. And when you can send people home feeling like that, you know what they do when they get home? They engage with their families, they play with their children. When you send somebody home afraid that they might get fired next week, they're a wreck at home, they're a wreck with their spouse, they're a wreck with their children. And that's not a way to send people home. So that's the first way that leaders can help start change the world.
Ooh,
Wow.
wow. That's like on point. And what comes to my mind, and Tom, you've got a sales career, but that translates to performance.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example. You have a low performing person those are difficult conversations to have. You have a low performing person. The coward leader brings them in their office and they said, I got to be honest with you, your numbers are awful. And I don't know what the hell's going on with you, but if you don't fix them quickly, um, I can't guarantee you a future here at this company. Have a nice evening. How do you think those people go home to work that night to their family?
Hmm.
Or play this scenario. Same scenario. Hey, can you stop in my office? I want to talk to you for a minute. Bob, I was looking at your numbers and clearly something's off. I mean, they traditionally don't represent everything you bring to this company, and I'm concerned about you. I'm worried about you. Is everything okay? Is everything okay at home? I'm worried about you. Is everything okay with your wife, with the kids, with you? Because I want you to know that if there's an outside factor affecting your performance, all I'm interested in is really helping you fix that. And if you need to talk to somebody, way smarter than I am on a professional basis, I'm happy to set that up for you. Compliments of the company, because all we want to do is help fix what's going on. But I'm concerned about you. How do you go home that night? I'd say feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
But
and ready to face the challenge because you know you're supported.
And it's in those situations too, it certainly should be no surprise to the employee if their performance is low to begin with, right? So they're probably waiting for a conversation of some sorts, and it can be either one of the scenarios that you just mentioned. And of course, the latter, I wholeheartedly agree with, and certainly been in that situation many times. So leadership plays a critical role in every function of every organization.
100%. And I think the really good employees, they'll come see you first, and
Yeah.
they'll tell you they're struggling or they're having some issues. Uh, I had I had an employee once that she happened to be female, one of the finest salespeople I've ever hired in my life. And she came in to see me one day and she goes, I'm having a problem. We go to see, I go to see XYZ furniture every week. He tells me to come every week, and I go in there, but I can't get him to, I can't get him to sign that advertising contract, and I just don't know what to do. And I said, "Oh, I can fix that for you in 10 minutes." She goes, "Well, what would you do?" I go, "Stop going into his business." She goes, "But he asked me to come every week." I go, "I understand that. But now you have to say, look, I can only spend this time with active clients. And when you're ready to sign the paperwork, I'm happy to come back every week and work with you on your advertising. But until then, I'm not going to be able to come anymore."
Right.
He signed the papers in 3 days. But there was it's funny, but um there's just a lot of nuances in sales and leadership. And I think that um, one thing I kind of learned the most, and I had such great mentors, but you know, when you go into a bookstore, you could find sections on self-help, but you can't find anything on how to help others. And I do believe that giving in all aspects of business and life is really the golden ticket. And unconditional giving, expecting nothing back in return, and you'd be surprised what where that leads to. And the other thing, aside from having great mentors in front of me, um, found that reading the biographies of billionaires will teach you more about business and life than any self-help book. Reading about their journeys and all they've been through is really a phenomenal learning tool.
I'm listening to this, and you shared an article with me that made me think what you're talking about here is a generous leadership, right? And it's comes from a place of abundance. And I look at the article you shared with me, and how there's ways to take that generosity and help others through the golf tournaments, through fundraising locally, through the kinds of activities that you get involved in. And it's been interesting to me. It doesn't just happen at a personal level, one-on-one with a salesperson, but you do it institutionally, and you do it in ways that involve large numbers of people. And that in turn is leadership that helps you achieve your goals and help others achieve their goals.
I think so. It's worked for me. Um, I found one thing in leadership, in that your most expensive mistake in leadership will be a who, not a what. It's not what you did to mess this up. It's usually about who. Someone you didn't treat right, or you didn't treat them the right way, or you didn't handle something correctly. What I found, and this was where I was really, really lucky. I call it organizational mentoring. When I was, I don't know, 23, 24, 25, and I'm early on in my career at the Sun Times, if I had a problem that I didn't I had an objection that I couldn't overcome or just a problem and I didn't know how to handle it, I always went to the older guys in the office, guys in the middle. At the time, these guys were 48, 50. Some were in leadership, some were just accomplished revenue generators. And I always got my answer, and I usually got a little lesson in life. Well, fast forward the clock 15 years, and I'm running the entire department. And all these people that I used to go to for advice and wisdom and that helped me, that paved the path for me to get where I got, they're all working for me now. And so my first thought was, how do I keep these guys as long as humanly possible? You know, they were between 60 and 67, all on the back nine towards retirement. How do I keep them as long as possible? Not, wow, they're over 50. They must be stupid. We've got to run them out here. We got to run them out of here and get our, 32-year-old friends here. That's what seems like a lot of corporate America does today. They have an incredible disrespect for older professionals, people that have come before them, raised families, put through kids through college, have just silos and silos of experience. They get treated terribly. And what the Sun Times taught me how to do is how to treat the older professional. But it wasn't, I thought it was just normal. Like that you express you give kindness and consideration and respect and dignity to the people that came before you. And the longer that I could keep all these guys around me, the better leader I am because of the knowledge and wisdom that I'm surrounding myself with. That was my goal, is to try to give my team as many options to go to solve a problem. But I learned truly how to treat the older professional. And it was funny because and I don't know what door opens when you're considered the older professional, but I saw a whole different area of treatment for older professionals than I did back then.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about one of the silos in Revenue Mountain?
Sure.
Um, in the go-to-market strategy, there's always a line in the sand that you're working towards, and that's launch date, whether it's a product or service or a new iteration of something. Um, what are the major things that happen prior to that? So,
Dig it?
and I
Okay.
mean just big bucket items, not detailed, but what are the big things that have to happen to have a successful GTM?
Open, honest, and authentic conversation is the single biggest thing that you have to get it right. Everybody has to be they have to say, here's where our strong points are, here's where our weak points are, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Can't hide anything. You got to lay it all out on the table. But and that's what I try to explain to people too. Sometimes when I meet with them, I got nothing to sell you. The only thing I want to sell you is really yourself. But what I want to sell you is open, honest, and authentic conversation. And if you could do that, you'll know at the end of the conversation, do you need data automation? Do what's going to happen when we go to market? You'll know if you want me to do it, if you want someone else to do it, if you even want to do it, but you'll know. But being open and honest is the key, I think.
Hmm, yeah. Do you go through exercises for helping the client, define their ICP, exactly who they want to focus on, the segment of markets, the segment of people, the demographics, all the things that go into targeting the right perfect customer?
Well, it's interesting because I don't know if there is most of them, by the time they get to me, they know what they're trying to reach conceptually. What I will do sometimes is provide other um, options to say, and throw out some other suggestions. But for the most part, they know who they want to go to. And the interesting thing about, if you just talk about, going to market is one thing, but you take the data automation silo, and every business has data. Every business. I don't care if you're a dry cleaners or a $6 billion food distributor. Everybody has data. And the thing that I saw, it was unbelievable to me how many companies were so far behind the times in terms of their data, the way they engage with their data, the way they interact with their data, the way they analyze their data, the way they review their data, the way they access their data. I mean, I've been in some situations where I've seen banks their people are taking 8 to 10 hours to find loan documents because it's all paper, it's all in files. And businesses don't realize that you can have most of this automated. Businesses that still work on spreadsheets. I was talking to a business leader the other day. He has a spreadsheet for what he does. Somebody else has a spreadsheet for what they do, but none of it's tied together. There's not one place where someone could go in, push a button, and see what everybody's doing, because of the way they keep their data. But data can truly change the way a business leads their life. Um, and it's fun to solve those problems.
And my experience, and I do this on the marketing side, right, by building CRM and marketing automation and tying that to these kinds of interviews, right? If I'm going to put media out there, I want to be able to know what it's, how it's helping my customers go through their experience with my company. And I can do that because I have data. And it starts out with having a conversation like this, and we'll know who's watching it. And then we'll create more content from this conversation and publish it out there, and we'll get engagement. And that creates data. But where I'm going with this is data also creates accountability. And when I listen to you talk about leadership, I'm very curious about, kind of as we wind down here, your experience as being a leader and that compassionate leader, and then bringing in the kind of data and automation where it enforces accountability. What does that do to a culture, and how do you think about that within the context of a business?
It's a great, great question. I think that if you do it the right way, okay, and I'm going to give you a quick little example, but when you can structure data solutions in the right way, what you actually do is you save businesses time and you save them money. But the most important is time. Um, we had and when I say save time, I don't mean figuring out data solutions where they don't need people anymore and you can, like, we never go in and say, hey, do you know what, we could fix this data solution and you could fire 5 people. We don't do that. Okay, but we had a retail 14 store pet supply business, 14 stores franchise, and they had all their invoices on clipboards and they had them pasted on bulletin boards. And when they would get an invoice, they would open it, they would print it, they would copy it, they would sign it, they would scan it, and they send it to the next guy. And he would do the same thing: print it, open it, sign it, scan it, send it. This would happen 3 times, and then the check would get cut. Well, what we did is we built an AI reader to read all their invoices, and then we built a dashboard that had all their store locations on it, and the AI reader knew where to put the invoices. So he would put them in by location. And now you push one button, you go to a dashboard, you could see every invoice that came into every store. You could see if it was opened and approved, opened and not approved, open and rejected, not even opened. We saved them over 3,000 hours in human labor of doing this mundane exercise of opening invoices, copying them, signing them, scanning them. I mean, you guys have all been in pet stores. You see how much product they have. You can imagine that times 14. It's crazy. And we saved them over 3,000 hours. And then because of the fact that they automated, they now had no need for another junior accountant person. They opened 2 stores a year. So they, in the past, would have to hire 2 accountant people. Well, they don't have to do that anymore because of the way we set this up. And it makes it much easier for their C-suite executives, their CFO, comptroller to navigate all that. And it works very efficiently. And it's really it's kind of a one-time payment that it gives you years and years and years of benefit and efficiency. That makes sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
It does, and it tells me that data and technology and automation is not about data and automation and technology. It's about what are you trying to do as a business leader, and how can these tools empower you to achieve those goals?
I mean, for us, it's always like, sharing with business leaders the ability to take you from outdated to automated. And it really is interesting though, because there are business leaders that for many, many years you've heard the term, this is the way we've always done it. And when you get old school people that they're afraid of change, money doesn't matter, price doesn't matter, none of that doesn't matter. It's a hard mountain to move. But we don't run into too many of those. We don't run into too many. But
Well, the best,
I go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, the best leaders I've worked for are the ones who bring the team along, right? And that transition that you just described, there's a lot of training, and those people, it sounded like you said they didn't lose their jobs, it changed their jobs.
Right.
And
Well, the smart business owners are smart enough to take the person who doesn't have to do this anymore and put them in an area where they can also contribute to the company in a different way. Um, but the one thing that I tell businesses all the time, I fortunately didn't have too much of this, but I've seen it. But the biggest concern for really any organization should be when their most passionate people become quiet. And then you kind of know you got a problem. And it usually goes into culture. And what I found interesting is that if you usually have a great leader from the top, usually his qualities, flow downward throughout the rest of the company. And everyone is hired commensurate on, reflective of the leader's personality and interpersonal traits. But sometimes bad leaders can infiltrate their way into really good companies, and they do this because they have a very, very unique quality of being able to kiss up, which means you curry favor with those above you in power, and then you kick down. You kick down on the people that have no power. And I've seen a few of those. I've worked for a couple. It's really, really, really not good. So I always tell business leaders when they're looking to hire an executive, especially in a sales role, and you want to talk to people that they've worked with over the years, I said, don't call the people that they reported to. Call the people who worked underneath them. Because you could BS your way up, but you can't BS your way down. And the salespeople know. And when you're their leader and you don't treat them so nice, they know. And, again, curry favor with those above you that have power and kick on the people down below you that have none. That happens too.
it's
More
a
than you think. More than you think.
I've been in organizations where I think as you go through a career, you see both sides of that. And Tom, you're nodding your head.
Yes. I'm just doing a Rolodex in my mind of all the leaders that I've worked with, and it's like teachers too. The ones that stand out are the great ones and the really bad ones.
Well,
That
what's
impact
interesting,
on your lives.
what's really interesting, I think, is I tell people this in business and in life, especially in business. Um, Be that type of person who reaches out to others when you don't need something. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. I just wanted to give you a call and see how you're doing. Reviving dormant relationships is the one thing that any business leader could do that could effectively change their business. You don't call them and ask them for anything. And most of the time, there's reasons why relationships went dormant. I moved south, you moved north. I have older kids, you have younger kids. It just, things happen. And there's no problems, no hassles, no anger. Just people wind up going in different directions sometimes. And one of the best things you could do is just call people I tell people that all the time. If you think about somebody, just pick up the phone and call them. And, nowadays you got to go through a calendar invite and you got to text. I just pick up the phone and call. And if you can't talk, I anticipate you won't answer or you'll tell me you can't talk. But it's really one of the biggest things that I've seen turn people's business around. It's just reviving dormant relationships. Now, understand, some relationships are dormant for a reason. The guy that embezzled from your company is probably not a guy you're going to call. But the guy that went south when you went north because he got married first and you stopped working at the same company. Um, those are the ones you do.
So I'm going to redirect here because we're going to wind down. But the fun part of the show, and I'm very curious, having been in the media industry, and then having some rock and roll passion yourself, beyond your leadership passion. Tell us a little bit about your outlook on music and rock and roll and your experience there in Chicago.
So I think the first group maybe that really influenced me was the Beatles. I remember watching them on Ed Sullivan like it was yesterday.
Wow.
And I think that every piece of music today has some component of the Beatles in it. I think the Beatles were years and years and years ahead of their time for the stuff they were pumping out when they were pumping it out. Um, but I'm somebody who, usually the people, they're rock and roll, or they're jazz, I listen to everything. I love rock and roll's great. I love jazz. I love you can catch me listening to a couple disco tunes from back in the day every once in a while. I love groups like Earth, Wind and Fire and the Isley Brothers and the OJs. And but I think every music, no matter who it is, has some influence from the Beatles in it.
Are you a concert goer?
I am. My first concert that I ever saw in my life where I paid for a ticket was Elton John and Kiki D at the Chicago Stadium. I want to say 74, 75, somewhere in there. 74, I think.
I'm
73,
going,
74.
I think it's more like 74, 75 because I was in middle school when that came out.
Yeah, but and the ironic thing was I saw Elton then, and then I was invited to a client's box a couple years ago, and we saw him, on what was supposed to be his farewell tour, which that's just a marketing scam. I was like, great, if I see him, then he's done. And next thing you know, he comes back a year later. But I saw him again, and he was just as great. But I've seen, Elton John. I've seen Springsteen. I've seen Jefferson Starship live. I've seen the Beach Boys live. Oh God, I've seen more than I can remember. I've seen what's his name? I can't remember I even went to see opera once live. Not so much on that, but I respect the love of the music, but not so much on that. I've seen Carole King and James Taylor,
Wow.
which is just I've seen James Taylor live, Carole King and James Taylor, spectacular show. So I like everything, and to me, music is generational. When I listen to Carole King and James Taylor, I think a lot about stuff from between high school in college, right in there, especially high school.
What I've
But
noticed doing this is that people's music tastes in contemporary rock and roll music tends to drop off in their 30s. Now they're having kids, they're buying houses, they're doing, different things. But when they talk about, we had a guest on that said Aerosmith was the soundtrack of his life in the 90s. And I was like, that was the soundtrack of my life in the 70s, you know?
it's music is special because I say this when it comes to music, when you're happy, when you're truly genuinely happy, um, you love the music. And when you're sad, you understand the lyrics. And
Mm.
that's what I really take out of music. It's when you're happy, you're loving the music. And when you're sad, you understand the lyrics. And that's some of the biggest things that I've seen in and around the music space of what it does to somebody. Music to me is therapy. I do my best work, I do my best writing when I have a little music on in the background. And music helps me sometimes get through days that are kind of shitty, just like you know, sometimes quotes and sayings. As I told you, I think Keith, I'm working on a book called um, advice and wisdom, a lifetime of advice and wisdom from friends, family, colleagues, and strangers. And I've curated a lot of this, and I'm going to put it out in book form. But sometimes just reading through that makes a bad day good. And just like music, you listen to music, you understand the lyrics. Sometimes you just love the music.
Yeah, we're responsible for programming our lives, aren't we?
Mm.
100%. 100%. It's all about that. It starts with us. I explained, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day that was talking about dealing with a difficult employee and, how to navigate that. And I said, well, if you deal with a difficult employee, you may have to change your behavior. And they said, well, I don't understand. Why do I have to change my behavior? They're the one that's difficult. They're the one that's the problem. I said, you're 100% right. I said, but it's your heart attack. It's your heart attack. So if
Wow.
you don't change your behavior, it's your heart attack. And sometimes, yeah, I get it. You don't want to do it. But sometimes in dealing with a difficult employee, you're the one that has to change, even though you don't think you do. And like I said, it's your heart attack. You control the stress level in this situation, just like your immediate boss or supervisor controls the
Hmm.
stress level that you go home from work with.
My dad raised me with a saying, you can't, like I'd come home in fourth grade and there was a bully or somebody who's giving me a hard time in middle school. And he said, you can't change other people. You can only change yourself. So what is it
Most of
inside
it's
that
how
you
you
need?
react to it.
Right.
I tell
Right.
everybody today, it's the situations are all how you react to them, not anything else. And that's the one thing that's really, really helped me over the years is understanding that I control mostly everything by the way I react. And so I've established a sense of calm over the last 10 years that I always didn't have. I would react and I would be honest and authentic. And although there was nothing wrong with it, sometimes that's not the best approach. But the best wisdom I heard from my father, which has kind of got me going on this track of curating kind of advices on wisdom. My dad told me when I was very young, he goes, you learn the most about people in three ways: when they're drunk, when they're angry, and when it comes to money. And I got to tell you, 100% spot on if you really think about it.
And when the three are together, whew,
Yeah, but I've seen it. I've seen all three in one person. I've seen someone when they're drunk. I've seen them when they're angry, and I've seen them when it comes to money. And sometimes I just see when it comes to money and when they're angry, but I've never seen them drunk. But you kind of know what to what you what you're dealing with here. But that was some advice that was um, just so spectacular, and it's like the gift that keeps on giving. Every
Well,
time I see somebody flip, you know, you can make that you can make an easy a evaluation, you know, when you see people in those situations.
well,
Yeah.
that's the leadership. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna agree wholeheartedly. And the other thing too, if you want to stay current, and you mentioned this, Keith, sometimes life gets in the way and you're in your 30s, 40s, and you really get stuck musically. I mean, this is true with a career, it's true with many things, but you get stuck with what you know, and that's what you gravitate toward. And it wasn't until I had three kids that as they were growing up, I would always ask them, you know, tell me what you're listening to. I'm curious what's, you know, and I didn't like it all by any stretch, but they've turned me on to some great music that I never otherwise would have listened to. And in turn, I give them some of the classics. And again, there are so many relations to that story to business and leadership and you know, engaging others and growing, you know, because if you don't grow, you die.
You know, it's funny in the music space. I equate a lot of music with life, and you take an artist like you know, there are some artists, you know, where you buy a ticket and it says the show's going to start at 7:30, and you get there and it doesn't start till 8:15, and then they play for an hour and 10 minutes and they leave. And they're done. And you take a guy like Paul McCartney, who I've seen several times in the last 10, 12 years. At his age, he doesn't take a drink of water, and he plays for every bit of 2.5, 3 hours hard. And I mean, there's a true value in a concert ticket right there. You get what you pay for. And that's a spectacular show to watch as well. He's extremely talented and still doing it into his 80s, which is amazing.
Yeah, I just saw the Mick Jagger and the Stones a couple weeks ago out in Phoenix, and that's that's the game that you bring, right? And why we do this. We're going to wind down, but why we do this podcast and get into this subject area is there's so many lessons from music and these talented performers that dedicate their career to finding a way to take something creative and turn it into a business. And today, if you're in sales or marketing, that's what you have to do. We live in a media saturated environment, and you have to put yourself out there as a performer, and you got to sell stuff.
Well, I think that the really good performers, they do the same things that really good people in life do when you talk about growth. And that's really the true growth. It comes in, it comes in, it comes by building character and integrity, giving more than you take, showcasing humility and empathy, and really having the courage never to compromise your values and people for money. And that's what really growth's all about. And you know, I think if you can do that and read some biographies of a few billionaires, you're on a pretty good path.
Wow, this has been a terrific conversation.
Yeah.
I
Really,
appreciate it very much, you guys having me. I can't tell you how much you know, it's just always fun to share, um, you know, different opinions and views. And that's what I think ultimately is going to help make our world a better place. The ability to listen to one another. You don't have to agree with everyone, but listen, understand, let people feel that they're being heard, especially in the office, outside the office. Biggest problems leaders have in the office is when their people don't feel they're heard. But let people be heard and share opinions, and hopefully we can find some solutions to you know, help our country get better. I used to think that, you know, I used to always say that I wanted to create a better world for my children. And, you know, I realized maybe 10 years ago that that's probably not possible. So now my mantra is to create better children for the world.
Mm.
That I can still control. So I'm good there. And, you know, there's no handbook on parenting, but I try to teach my kids early what I learned late. And I think so far we've done okay.
Well, Burt, it's been a pleasure having you. You have a lot to share. There's a lot of depth there, and you know, I reflect. I think sometimes sales gets a bad rap for being, uh, you know, a little superficial, but there was not an ounce of superficiality here at all, and I appreciate your leadership.
I appreciate you guys having me and taking the time, and I don't say making time for me, but you guys invested your time in me, and it's something you're never going to get back. You know, we can spend money and waste money. We can always make money back, but you can't make time back. And so I appreciate you guys giving me your time, your class, your character, and um, thank you for having me.
Well, we do this to demonstrate our Publio studio and the podcast ecosystem. And so a little bit of an advertisement at the end here, but I'm so excited to share with you the blog we write and the videos we create and the things that we do to help tell your story.
Thank you, and I'll do the same. Feel free to access revenuemountain.com. I'm doing a blog called Bird's Eye View, and the first one I wrote was the dumb things that sales leaders do,
The
which I
day
think
I,
is a good read, and it's things that I've seen in real life. I just didn't make them up, but it's things I've lived through and watched people do, and it's just funny, and I'm at the point in my career where I can share a little bit more of that openly. I don't name names. I'm not looking to hurt anyone, but just take situations that. And listen, I've learned as much from idiot leaders as I have from the most inspirational ones.
Mhm.
The idiot leaders may be some of the more valuable ones in the weirdest of ways. That's another show, but I heard something really interesting the other day, and we were talking in business about everyone's like, well, just send an email or send a text. And I referenced before about, um, community, like I just pick up the phone and call people. Like it's a pretty simple thing. And I heard the line, and I'm not smart enough to think of the line, but the guy said to me, he goes, every time you send an email, he goes, man, he goes, that's just a to-do list for someone else. And when you think about emails that way, you're just creating a to-do list for someone else. Skip the to-do list, pick up the phone and call. And that's just we were just guys that grew up when you picked up the phone and call. You want to talk to somebody, you call. Now I got to go to a calendar link and I got to go to, I remember saying, I said, well, I'm going to call you. He goes, would you want to set up an appointment? I go, no, I'll call you, pick up the phone. If you can talk, you talk. If you can't, you can't. But the one thing I will tell you that I share with every leader, everybody in a leadership position is do not allow a wishbone to grow where a backbone should be, and you really need to stand up strong as a leader and have some intestinal fortitude, and again, don't let a wishbone grow where a backbone should be. One of the best things I've heard in a while.
so I've in several times in my career um, moved on to other opportunities when it's been put in front of me to speak truth to power, and at least you walk away with your head held high. You don't always control what happens, but that backbone's important.
Yeah, you don't control what happens, but you control how you react to what happens, and that's really, really crucial that a lot of people they don't think about. And I really tried to focus on, um, how I react to things. But I think the one thing I'll share is I think as we get older in life, I think life humbles us very deeply, and I think that we eh, eh, I think in general we become more quiet. Life humbles you. You become more quiet, and you realize how much nonsense you've wasted time on. And so my goal in kind of moving forward is just to be conscious of other people's time and don't waste time. And I don't want to waste mine. And other than that, life is pretty good. It's not easy. Um, You know, it's not easy. Sometimes it's a shitstorm of stuff, but you know, the way you react to things and the way you handle things and
And how you treat people, that's what I hear from you.
yeah, it's really is all about, you know, the way you treat people. Um, and I think that it just when you give more than you take in life, you get back more than you give every time. And giving more than you take also comes in the way you treat people. It's giving of yourself, it's giving of your time, it's giving of your character. It's trying to make people feel better leaving than when they came to see you. But you know, and the other thing that's really important, don't don't offer a lecture to somebody when sometimes all they need is a hug. And there's too many people that want a lecture, you know, and you have to be able to see, do they need a lecture or do they need a hug? And most times people just need a hug. But there's a lot of times people are lecturing the people that need hug.
Well, interestingly, I met you. We've had what, 3 phone calls. We've talked about each other's businesses and what our goals are. And I can tell you working with you is like having a nice big hug. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if I leave you with one last thing, I'll tell everybody out there that, you know, many people are in sales roles. Don't be desperate to sell. Be hungry to serve. And I think if you take that motto and go with it and navigate it, you'll do just fine in business. You know, again, you give more than you take, you get back more than you give, and it's something that's worked for me. And the other thing that's really worked for me when it came to hiring people, I always hired for character and trained for skill, and it's a model that never failed me.
There you go. Well, that's a great way to wind up. And I can't wait to turn this into a story and help you tell yours and build your legacy. You got a lot to share. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great joy. Thank you.
Take care, Bert.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.